Hi, everyone, and thank you for having me today. I'm Deena Rae, founder of eBookBuilders, and I help indie authors like yourself design and build professional market-ready books. At eBookBuilders, we approach publishing like architecture. A strong book isn't just about the words, it's about the words, structure, sequence, and building things in the right order so the final product actually holds up. When that sequence is off, everything downstream gets harder and more expensive to fix. Today, we're going to look at that critical phase between typing the end and seeing your book listed as now on sale, and what actually happens during book packaging, also known as pre-production, and where things tend to go wrong. You'll notice I use a lot of architecture and building language, and that's intentional. Before I went full time into publishing, I spent years working in industries where precision mattered. You didn't wing it and hope for the best, you followed a process or things broke. That mindset carried over into how I approach books. I don't just format files, I build them. Before we dive in, I want to set expectations. We're going to walk through what actually happens during book packaging and why order matters more than most people realize. We'll look at how editing and book design fit together and where things tend to go wrong. We'll talk about why a small change late in the process can create big problems, how print and ebook production are completely different systems, and how to tell if your book is actually ready to move forward. My goal here is clarity, not to overwhelm. So you leave knowing what to do next, and just as importantly, when to do it. Quick note, when I say book packaging, there are actually people whose job it is to manage all of this. They go by a lot of different names, and I'll break that down in a minute. But what they're really doing is coordinating editors, designers, proofreading, everyone needed to get a book finished, basically juggling all the moving pieces. Most authors don't realize they've taken on that role themselves until something starts going wrong. Most authors don't struggle because they're bad writers. They struggle because they don't understand the process behind building the book. Small misunderstandings, especially around sequence, turn into big delays, extra costs, and a lot of unnecessary frustration. Not because the work is difficult, although it can be for some genres, but because the order isn't clear. Once you understand the sequence, most of that becomes avoidable. And most of the time, it's not a writing problem, it's a packaging problem. What we're really talking about here is book packaging. It's the process of bringing together editing, design, and proofing into a finished product. Editing focuses on the words, clarity, consistency, grammar, and flow. Book design focuses on how those words are presented with layout, spacing, typography, and readability. Proofing happens at key stages to catch issues before moving forward. It's your quality control. These are not competing tasks. They are different parts of the same build. And when they're done in the right order, the result is a set of production-ready files. Files that are actually ready to publish and be on bookstore shelves. There are people in the industry whose job it is to manage this entire project or process. They are called book packagers, book shepherds, book developers, publishing project managers, full service publishing teams, and me. I am considered, or I consider myself really, a publishing architect, or a book architect. We coordinate editors, designers, proofers, everything else needed to bring a book to completion. When that role is missing, authors end up trying to manage it all themselves, and that's where things start to break down. Editing itself isn't just one thing. It's a series of passes. Developmental editing looks at structure and the big picture issues. Line and copy editing refine the language and consistency. Proofreading is the final polish before production. The key point here is that editing is layered and needs to be completed before the book moves into design. Once the text is stable, everything else becomes significantly easier. Skipping or rushing through any of these steps usually shows up later during layout, where it's much more expensive to fix. If editing isn't finished, design becomes expensive very quickly. Book design, often called formatting, is where the finalized text is turned into a professional reading experience. This is where your manuscript stops being a document and becomes a book. It includes layout, typography, spacing, and flow. Everything that affects how the reader moves through your story or content. Book design assumes the text is already stable. When it's not, every small change creates a ripple effect. This is also where a lot of DIY falls apart, because design isn't just about making it look nice, it's about readability, consistency, and functionality. Good book design isn't just about making something look nice. And when it's done poorly, readers feel that too. They just don't know why. It controls readability, how easy it is for the reader to stay engaged without getting fatigued, not squished together, not spaced a mile apart, just comfortable to read. It controls visual balance, how text sits on the page, how chapters open, how consistent everything feels from beginning to end. It establishes hierarchy, so readers can instantly tell what's a chapter heading and what's a scene break, and what matters and what doesn't. And it ensures the book actually functions properly across print and ebook, and that it's been tested, not just exported and hope for the best. When this is done well, readers don't notice it, but they feel the difference. When book design isn't done well, or when it's done before the text is ready, issues start to show. Spacing becomes inconsistent. One chapter starts at the start of the page and another starts halfway down for no reason. And once these issues start showing up, you're not building anymore, you're fixing. Typography feels off or distracting. Too many fonts or wrong fonts used in the wrong way. Page breaks land in awkward places. Paragraphs don't flow the way they should. And in ebooks especially, formatting issues show up fast, and they make a book feel unprofessional very quickly. These are the kind of things readers may not consciously name, but they absolutely impact reviews, readability, and overall perception. And this is why sequence matters, because once design begins, changes become much harder to manage. The most common issue I see isn't a lack of skill, it's sequencing. Authors move into layout before the text is truly finished. Then edits start happening during design, and now everything has to shift over and over and over and over. And that's where time, cost, and frustration start stacking up very quickly. This isn't a skill problem, it's a breakdown in the packaging process. When a book is laid out, designers fix things readers don't consciously notice, but absolutely feel. Widows, orphans, and runts are all part of making a page look balanced and professional. Once those are corrected, changing even one sentence can knock everything out of alignment for at least that paragraph. And that's why late edits don't stay small, they ripple. And that's why one change is never just one small change. This is the sequence that keeps your book aligned from manuscript to final product. You finish the book. Your final draft is done. Then it goes through editing. Then proofreading. This is your last cleanup before design. Then it moves into book design and layout. After that, there is a final proof once the layout is complete. Then everything is checked, finalized, and prepared for upload. And only then do you publish. When this order is followed, the process is smooth, predictable, and efficient. When it's not, especially when the layout happens too early, that's when the problems start multiplying. This is what I see happen most often. A manuscript gets finished, and instead of completing pre-production, it moves straight into layout. And then editing starts happening. After design, then proofing starts while things are still changing. A final proof gets pulled, but changes are still happening, so it's not actually a final. And that turns into relayout, repeated changes, and going in circles. I actually know an author who published a book in 2016, and since then, he's revised it over 100 times, and actually it's probably more like 150. Not because he didn't care about the book, but because he was trying to fix it after it was already built. Granted, his is an extreme case, but revisions of indie books like this happen all the time. Maybe it's not 100 or 150 revisions, but it's 5, it's 10, it's 20. And almost all of it could have been avoided by bringing in a fresh set of eyes during editing, before the book ever moved into production. Eventually you get a version that feels done. But now you're fixing things that should have been handled earlier. And then you hit publish. By the time you get there, more time and money have been spent fixing problems than doing it correctly in the first place. This isn't a talent problem. It's a process problem. And most of that extra work and extra money, it's preventable. Print and ebooks are not interchangeable. Print is static. What you see is what you get. This is where you can control every detail. Page layout, fonts, spacing, even full background designs. Ebooks are fluid. Fonts resize, screens change, the layout adapts to the device. You don't have the same level of control, and what looks one way on one device can look completely different on another. That's why professional workflows create specific files instead of trying to force one file to do everything. Trying to make one file work for both is where formatting issues start. These are the signs that pre-production isn't complete yet. Fixing things during formatting creates errors and delays. Proofreading is a separate skill set. And Amazon will not fix your book. They will simply sell it as is. And yes, I hear these way more often than I should. After everything we've covered, the real question becomes, how do you know when pre-production is complete? It all comes down to this. Editing is finished, the design is complete, and the proofreading has been done. At this point, your files are stable, and that's what done actually means. It's not almost finished. It's not still making changes, but ready to move into the publishing without breaking things. Done means stable, not almost there. A professional book isn't built in one step. It's packaged through coordinated process. Clear roles, clear stages, and the right sequence are what makes everything else work. When that process is handled correctly, everything works. When it's not, everything becomes harder to fix. And fixing it later is always more expensive. If today raised questions about your own project, or you're not alone, that's exactly where most authors are at this stage. I've built out a full educational hub that walks through everything we've touched on today in more detail. If you want more hands-on, I also offer a free file audit where I can take a look at what you've got and tell you where things stand. Either way, the goal is the same, to help you build it right the first time, because fixing it later is always more expensive.